It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Hello and welcome to the Happy Families Podcast. So good to have you along. My name's Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm here with my wife and mum to our 6 kids, Kylie, and this is Happy Families. Kylie, something a little bit different today. You said that you wanted to run the podcast. I'm not sure if I'm understanding you correctly. You wanted to run the podcast. You said you want the reins to kick things off. And all I know is that you want to quiz me on some stuff.
Well, I'm not even sure if we're going to get through this.
Right.
In the last 30 seconds, we've had 3 different children come to the door.
Oh, so hard.
How hard is it?
It's so
Just
hard.
Just a few minutes of peace, please.
I think this is why people, major organisations are starting to say that work from home is not a thing and it can't keep going. So many interruptions, my goodness. Anyway, what do you want to talk about today?
Birth order ideas are everywhere at the moment in my social feeds.
Right.
So I wanted to talk to you about whether or not there is actually any scientific proof to birth orders.
Well, before we talk about birth order generally, let me just quickly suggest that you can safely disregard, I'd say 90%, maybe 95%, maybe 99% of what shows up in your social feeds. It's credibility, reliability, the quality of information that you get on social media is generally low. I know that there's more and more people taking relationship and parenting advice on TikTok and Instagram. It is true that there are some really smart people doing some really good things there. So I want to be supportive of that. But you kind of have to have a PhD in the thing that you're interested in so that you know which of the 100% is the 90% that you should ignore and which of the 100% is the 10% that you should take on. Did that make sense?
You just lost me.
What I'm saying is most of it's rubbish and you've got to be really smart to know what's good and what's not. That's what I'm saying.
But the challenge is, for the average person, I'm looking at the fact that there's been a bajillion views on something. It's tracting.
Which gives it credibility.
Credibility.
Exactly. So you see something's had 3 million views and you think, well, this must be really good. And it might be really good, but it doesn't mean it's right. It might just be really funny or really clever or whatever, but not necessarily right.
Well, the general gist of birth order stereotypes, the eldest child...
Hang on a sec before you go on. Is this your general gist from what you've picked up on your social media feed?
No, not so much from social media. I think across the board. Over the years, we've heard
It's kind of in
this.
the environment.
Yeah, over and over again.
Yep.
Eldest children, they're the responsible, reliable ones.
Yeah.
Middle children, we call it middle children syndrome for a reason. They feel hard done by because they're kind of left out in the middle of no man's land.
Middle kids are often spoken of as being very competitive, though.
I was about to say there is a different element to that as well.
Yeah, got to clamour for attention because the oldest and the youngest always take it.
And then the third born or last born is fun-loving, attention-seeking, and they're probably no responsibility. They're the one that gets away with everything because mum and dad are so tired by that point. They don't have rules like they had for baby number 1.
And the youngest one often also gets all of the treats and all the goodies because mum and dad have gotten themselves into a financial position that the oldest kids never had, right? Like the longer you live life, ideally, the more established you become and therefore the more you can afford. I remember watching my youngest siblings go on the best holidays ever. And I'm not going to complain and say I never got to go on holidays with my family, but nothing compared to what my younger siblings got. And even in our family, I'm seeing that happen as well. Our eldest daughter, mid-20s, is watching what the youngest kids are getting and going, they're doing pretty well, aren't they?
And she makes sure everybody knows this.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think the only other thing that comes out is often the youngest children have very little photographic evidence.
Well, again, in our family, so for Chanel, our eldest, you did all of this beautiful art and put together this incredible photo album, and you did a cross stitch for her wall with her birth date on it and a picture of a baby sleeping and under a blanket. I mean, it was just gorgeous. And you started a cross stitch for Abby, our second born, 3 years later, which was never completed. And I don't think any of our kids have got photo albums other than Chanel.
Hey, stop throwing shade.
Right.
Let's just be real. Chanel, our eldest, she got till she was 2. It's not like I did a grand job of her existence, and I am doing my very best to catch up on the other 5 children in the process.
And so there's a whole lot of people who are out there who are writing books about birth order and getting paid big money to give birth order talks and that sort of stuff.
It's a big deal, and there's a huge market for it.
There's a really big market, and people are super responsive. People really seem to, I don't know, get caught up in it. People really love the whole birth order thing.
I think I know what you're going to say, what your answer is based on your reactions already.
I thought you were going to say based on the fact that we've been married for 27 years.
part, is there actually any truth to birth order?
Oh, so Kylie, the tricky thing here is that so much of it feels right.
If you were to ask me whether or not I fitted the eldest child bracket, 100%.
And there's a lot of stuff on social media at the moment about eldest daughter syndrome specifically, because the eldest daughter is the one from, in terms of a distribution of labour and expectation and being the responsible one because they're the eldest. There's heaps of stuff that's been booming for a few months now about the eldest daughter having to carry the weight of the family.
Well, growing up, my mum specifically rode me really, really hard in learning how to take care of a home.
I remember you saying that you were making beds with nice hospital tucks on the corners from like 5 or 6 years of age.
Yeah, easily. My little sisters did not. When I got married and left home, they literally would call me almost in tears because they had no idea how much of the load I had carried for all those years.
All true. Eldest daughter syndrome. It must be a thing.
So I'm just saying.
So here's what we know from a research point of view. It feels right, but it's not really right. There are some things that you're going to tick the boxes and go, yeah, okay, birth order is a thing. This all came about from the 1920s, a guy called Alfred Adler. And this is what we would call Adlerian psychology. And he came up with this whole birth order thing. And really, it's just vexed. The evidence doesn't support it. I'll tell you why. You've got issues around gender and gender roles. So eldest daughters and eldest sons have different experiences. And when you have boy, girl, boy, or boy, 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 or girl, 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 or whatever, that plays havoc with it. The size of the gap between the kids has a huge impact on whether or not these stereotypes fit. And there's so much more. Like you have blended families. You have families where there are twins. You have families where there's the tragedy of a death of a sibling. So let's say the eldest child passes away, does the second child now become the eldest child and take on those attributes and characteristics? I mean, none of this really works. And then you've got families like ours where you've got 6 kids. So what happens when you get to number 4 and number 5? Which one's the middle child when you've got 6 children?
Well, it's 2, 3, 4, and 5, isn't it?
they're all competitive. That makes so much sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Right now in Australia as well, there's real concern that there are no more middle children at all, because the average Australian woman is presently having 1.5 children.
I don't understand that maths, but anyway.
Well, on average, I mean, nobody's really having 1.5 children, obviously. But when you have fewer children, that means most families today are only having 1 child or 2 children. Yeah. And it's amazing, especially when I'm doing talks in inner city schools and in corporations for people who are working in their sort of more high-powered jobs.
Well, it's one way to get rid of sibling rivalry, isn't it?
Yeah, just don't have siblings, I know. But increasingly, I'm meeting people who are stressed out and worried and hothousing their 1 child.
Yeah.
And maybe some of you right now are listening to the podcast and thinking, oh my goodness, that's me. He's talking about me. He's throwing shade at me. You maybe, because we're investing so much in our 1 or in our 2. But middle children are literally, in some suburbs of Australia, are literally becoming a thing of the past. Which I think is really astonishing. So the whole Adlerian birth order conversation is potentially becoming less relevant than ever. Kylie, my impolite version of this is that while some families might experience some of this with birth order, it's basically a load of rubbish. The evidence is really shaky at best. And so I get really concerned when people are out there trumpeting this stuff and making money off it, because it's just rubbish. Like so that sounds really harsh, but the evidence isn't there to support it. The evidence just isn't there to support it. Some of it rings true, but the evidence isn't there.
I want to say really? Because it's just so accepted. But when I look at the experiences that we're having within our family, just alone, let alone our friends' families, I don't see the evidence. I remember a long time ago you telling me that I could read my star signs and I would find correlation in my life on a daily basis. There would be some truth in there that would marry. And I think that we see that. I look at our eldest daughter and she is ridiculously responsible. She's the first one to jump in.
But she's also in her mid-20s, and all of her sisters they're in their teens. Well, there's a couple in their early 20s, but they're still living at home. She's married. Like she's at a totally different point in her life, which is much more likely to explain what's going on.
And that's what I was going to say.
Maturity.
It is a maturity thing. And you think about any other relationship where you're dealing with somebody who's 10 years older than you or whatever, you often will deflect to them because of seniority and age, often,
Right.
not always the case. But I just think as our children, as we've watched subsequent children age and grow and mature, they're taking on responsibilities that they wouldn't have done 5 years ago because they've matured.
Well, and that's the thing. So Chanel aged out of the system and Abby became the big sister, and then Abby aged out and Ella did, and now Annie has, and we're watching Lily mature into that as well as Annie's getting close to finishing her schooling and moving on with her life. So I would argue that much of this is about maturity and illusory correlations. Kylie, there are some studies that do indicate that birth order has an impact on some things like higher IQ. I just want to put this out there in bright flashing lights because I want to emphasize I am an eldest child.
I don't know what happened to me then.
And you are also an eldest child. And eldest kids do have a slightly higher IQ compared to their siblings. They are known as being more intelligent.
Again, I can only go on the experiences we've had. But when I think about parenting our eldest child...
I'm not actually kidding. The research does show that.
Yeah, I know. And when I think about that, I think about how much more uninterrupted time she had with me.
Yes.
It's not that she got more time with me. She got uninterrupted time with me. She didn't have to share me with anybody else.
It comes down to parental investment. I'm convinced of that. It's all about parental investment. They're more likely, eldest children are more likely to stay at school longer as well, although the research around that is not particularly strong, but it's sort of strongish.
But do you think, again, when you look at that uninterrupted childhood experience, when we understand and know that the first 7 years of a child's life is foundational to their growing, they've been invested with so much because
they're feeling more competent.
Yeah. That's got to play a part.
Yeah. Also, in terms of research, from a personality point of view, there's no relationship between personality and birth order. Like, if you meet somebody at a parent meet and greet or at a picnic, and you're bumping into somebody for the first time and saying, "Hi, I'm Justin. You're Kylie. Nice to meet you." You can't look at that person and say, "I've been observing you for the last 4 minutes, and I'm pretty sure you're a middle child, aren't you? Or you're definitely a youngest." Like, you can't tell when you're working with somebody. You've got no idea where they.
I have had plenty of people tell me I'm an eldest child.
Must be that eldest daughter syndrome thing coming out again. Anyway.
So why do the ideas persist then? I mean, like I said, this is going around like crazy at the moment.
Yeah, a couple of things. First off, I think that there's just that illusory correlation thing going on. And it's in the water, it's in the ether, it's in the environment. We've been talking about it for so many decades. It's just one of those conversational topics that comes up. So I would say that that's what's going on. Ultimately, what we're talking about here is not a birth order reality. I think it's just that family patterns change and people mature. To me, that's the whole thing.
Earlier, you talked about this whole idea of eldest daughter syndrome. I actually haven't heard the words before.
Yeah, it's huge on social media.
But I can relate.
Yeah, yes, as you have suggested. Here's the thing. A bulk of the caregiving, caretaking, kin-keeping, I don't know what word you want to use, the work of keeping a family together falls to women. That's the way that it has been in most societies across the generations, across time, across cultures. Rightly or wrongly, that's the way that it has been.
It's interesting you say that because from, I guess, a historical point of view, with that patriarchal society, I would have thought that the eldest son would have played a much bigger role.
Provide and protect, as opposed to doing the social work. Provide and protect. So you read a book like The Weirdest People in the World. You read something like Guns, Germs and Steel. Basically, any really...
no one's reading books like that.
These are incredible books. Any book that does major work on the anthropological history of our culture and our species, they all point in the same direction. Okay, it's like, this is not a politically loaded thing. It's simply the history of the world in an unfiltered fashion. But if you look at it, if an oldest daughter happens to have a younger brother, research shows that the split of gendered expectations is even stronger. We see older daughters take on more housework than their little brothers. Even younger sisters will do more housework than their older brothers. That's the world that we live in, which is a really big concern here, I think. I mean, we talk about, I'm writing this book about raising boys right now, and I'm really taken by the idea that Richard Reeves highlights about how you go from being a boy to a man when you start to contribute more than you take. And we see boys as they're growing up, there's just a completely gendered split when it comes to the division of labour in the household, especially when it comes to kids and their chores. It's absolutely fascinating. But again, this is less about birth order and more about gendered division of labour now. We're sort of stepping into a different area as well. I guess the other reason that these ideas persist, Kylie, is there's confirmation bias at play. So if you've been consistently told that you're the responsible one or the athletic one or the helpless one or the musical one or the funny one, it starts to become part of your identity. But a second child or a later born child might be more artistic or more funny or more whatever because they've been exposed to more opportunities because, as we said, parents have more financial stability as they have more kids and as life goes on. So my upshot of this is that birth order isn't destiny. And to make sure of it as a parent, what we need to do is spread the love around and spread the responsibility around as well. And if someone tries to sell you a book about birth order, hold on to your money and run. I'm really glad you took control of the podcast today, honey. That was fun.
I love your sense of control.
I like it. I like it when you're in control. Hey, we should stop there. The Happy Families podcast is back tomorrow. Thanks so much to Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. He's our producer and he makes the podcast sound great. If you'd like more information about making your family happier, please visit us at happyfamilies.com.au. Oh, tomorrow on the pod, can't wait for this one, talking with Brett Campbell, the CEO of Yuka, the homeschooling company that provides curricula to families who are trying to pull their kids out of school and do it all at home. Can't wait for that one.